March 7th was a wonderful day by all accounts. I drove to Washington, D.C. to participate in my 6th screening of the Red Pill movie. There I was able to connect once again with my friend Tom Golden. Also, there was Harry Crouch, Allison Tiemann, Michael Perrott, and other people I admire. Several supporters approached me for handshakes and the occasional selfie. Allison filmed a discussion with me, Tom, Harry, and Michael for the Honey Badger Brigade. Overall, it was a fantastic trip, and with the Red Pill movie now in worldwide digital distribution, it was likely the last one of these events to come. It was gratifying that I got to share that with so many great people. At the end of the evening, I went to my Airbnb rental and got a good night's sleep before making the 4-hour drive back home. I slid behind the wheel of my car with a smile and put the key in the ignition when the realization hit me like a rogue wave, capsizing my security and putting me in a state of instant and absolute terror. It was March the 8th. The fateful day had come. The day without a woman. I sat there frozen for a few minutes. I debated on whether to go back to the B&B and plead with them to give me another night there. I wasn't sure it would be safe to make the 240-mile drive back to Roanoke. Who was minding the infrastructure? Were the roads safe? What about the bridges? Traffic lights require power to operate, and in the absence of power, it would take police to come out and manually direct traffic and keep things safe. How could any of that keep running if women weren't there to make sure that the world was going as planned? How many traumatic things would I witness on the road? Would planes be falling out of the sky? What about fires? If there were fires anywhere, who would put them out? Surely there would be carnage on the highways. For God's sake, there was only going to be male drivers on the road. Surely Interstate 81 would be a demolition derby. And what if my car broke down? Who would fix it? A man? What if I got a flat tire? Who would see me on the side of the road and feel sorry enough for me to stop and put a spare on? Feminists promised us that this day was coming, a day that the world would be forced to wake up and take notice of what happens when women don't show up to make their contribution to running the world. And me, idiot that I am, privileged white male that I was, I got so caught up in the idea of seeing friends and fellow advocates in the nation's capital that I let it slip my mind long enough to end up a 4-hour drive from the safety and comfort of my own home. Mind you, safety could have been just a figment of my imagination. After all, if I was home and toxic men kicked the door open to rob me, who would I call? The police? What could the police do without women to show up and face the danger? My comfort could have been just as imaginary. What if the toilet got stopped up? What if the heat quit working? What if the thingy that opens my garage door stopped working or something else with a moving part quit moving like it was supposed to? What would I do then? Call a man? The longer I sat there in my car, trembling and now having to pee, the more I realized that nowhere and nothing was safe on this day without a woman. For all I knew, Canadian troops were pouring across the northern border and were on their way unopposed to Washington, where I sat paralyzed in fear. Enough of this, I finally thought. Maybe this would be good for me. For my sense of independence. And after all, I had probably taken women for granted far too long. I never noticed when thinking about all the technology I use and depend on every day just how much women contributed to it. I never took the time to appreciate how women were responsible for inventing the cars on the road, for developing the fuel sources to power them, for the roads themselves and all the vast construction projects that give us comfortable, climate-controlled environments in which to do soft, low-paying, and marginally important jobs that leave us with the energy to complain about how hard we have it. I had completely failed to think about women's critical role in delivering us clean water, safe food, and literally any material item we could think of over an internet they invented. I gave all that a good long bit of consideration and quit feeling sorry for myself. I switched on the GPS navigation in my smartphone that some woman undoubtedly invented, put my car in gear, and fiercely faced the trip alone, knowing full well that I, just a man, was on my own. Before you know it, I felt a literal rush of empowerment. I followed the instructions on the phone thingy and made it back up to the interstate and started driving south, every bit as well or even better than any woman could. I must have left my Pink CD at home, so I had to settle for slapping a Stevie Ray Vaughan CD in the player, knowing that there were much better women guitarists in the world, but appreciating his awkward licks for what they were worth. Despite all my concerns, I made it home just fine. The garage door even opened as planned, undoubtedly thanks to some inventive woman. As the clock moved toward midnight, I turned on the TV and watched some news, hoping to learn that no major tragedies befell the American people on the day without a woman. I was pleased to see that for the most part it was life as usual, except for some schools closing because teachers called in sick. They were interviewing a father who had to skip work that day because with the school closed, there was no one to watch his children. I'm sure that taught his daughter a great lesson. The world runs just fine without women. Oh, and we need more male teachers, or at least enough female teachers that won't punish the children they are supposed to teach so they can engage in what teachers' unions have already conditioned them to do, which is pretty much nothing. And of course, I already knew all this. But I wasn't kidding about getting something to think about from the day without a woman. It made me wonder what would really happen if we had a day without a man. It's a fact, whether anyone likes it or not, that every single ill-fated effect from a day without a woman could be remedied by simply having more men in primary education. A day without a man, however, would be much different. Does anyone really think that there are enough qualified women to run the vital components of this country for even 24 hours? Not a chance. Buildings would burn to the ground. There would be chaos and rampant criminality in the streets. Public services would come to a screeching halt, and the Canadians could indeed, if they were so inclined, pour across our borders in the morning and take Washington before dinner. This whole demonstration, promoted and directed by the most privileged human beings that have ever lived on this planet, was a prime example of how absolutely unnecessary and useless they really are. A day without a woman had all the impact of a day without a welfare queen, or a day without a gender studies major, which is to say it was a fail before it ever started. I take note that there are plenty of women who couldn't be bothered to participate in the parade of personality disordered terminal whiners. They showed up and did their jobs knowing full well that if you wanted a day-long strike that would shock the world, it would have to come from men. And the fact is that men, who have many more reasons for this kind of strike, opt instead to keep the world running. Maybe that's the attitude that comes when you know what you do actually matters. And that is it for another Talk from an Ear from Men. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.